So it is August, and it's plenty hot up here on the roof, and President Trump is at his summer home in New Jersey, but he's hardly kicking back. Tonight, he is upping the ante against Turkey and Russia and Iran, a triumvirate that is bonding over mutual and despised U.S. sanctions against all of them. The president announcing that he will double steel and aluminum tariffs on Turkey. Earlier this week, the president issued what he called the most biting sanctions ever imposed against Iran. And now Fox News has confirmed that Iran has test-fired a ballistic missile or short-range ship missile for the first time this year. Meanwhile, President Trump imposed sanctions against Russia over the chemical weapons attack in London on a spy and his daughter. Those new sanctions met with fury from Prime Minister Medvedev, who issued this threat today.
If
something like a ban on bank operations or currency use follows, it will amount to a declaration of economic war, and it will warrant a response with economic means, political means, and if necessary, other means. Our American friends should understand that.
If necessary, other means, he says. Here now to break all this down for us, General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, always good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you, Martha. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you. Great to be here. Let's kind of go around the horn here on what's going. First of all, with Iran, with the firing of this missile and the mobilization in exercises that they say they moved up to the summer time frame because of these sanctions. They usually do it in the fall. What do you take from that?
Well, clearly, Iran is trying to send a message to the Trump team here based on the sanctions they're imposing. They fired a missile 2 to 3 weeks after the inauguration, test-fired ballistic missiles. Trump came right out, sanctioned them, and said malign behavior again is going to be worse coming from the United States. We're not going to put up with this. And they haven't done anything like that since. They're doing it now because they're pretty much under our boot when it comes to the sanctions we're imposing on them. They are significant in terms of taking them out of the dollar financial market. Implication, it may spread to the international market as well, and then shutting down gold, precious metals, aluminum, steel, graphite, coal, automobiles, a long list of things. And next, coming November is when we go after oil and the energy sector, and that is going to be very imposing on the Iranians. Their economy is already in the tank. It is struggling severely. And the real is their currency. It is almost close to being valueless. And black market is the way of doing business in Iran. So the pressure is on them. And come November, it'll be on them like it's never been before.
So if they're backed into a corner and you look at the Strait of Hormuz, is that an option for them to block that?
If they block the Strait of Hormuz, we will take out literally all their military on the Strait of Hormuz. That's an act of war if they pull a stunt like that, and they know what the results of that will be. And that will push the United States into conflict. Iran does not want conflict with the United States. Remember, 38 years of conflict, all using proxies, avoiding direct confrontation with their own military. That is one thing. Despite the fact that they harass our ships, they'll fire a missile here and there, they do not want that kind of conflict.
All right, what about Turkey? Obviously, it roiled the markets today. Their economy is under tremendous pressure, and Erdogan lashing out, making phone calls to Putin. We know that Secretary Pompeo also spoke to his counterpart in Russia today. A lot of tensions there.
Yeah, Turkey's facing a political and a financial crisis. The political crisis really goes back to the coup of 2016, when Erdogan nearly was toppled, and not a single NATO nation, to include the United States, provided any moral support. Nobody spoke in his favor because he's moving that regime to an authoritarian regime, moving it away from democracy. And as a result of that, he came out and he said, I want the leader who was the catalyst for this coup, who resides in the United States, a guy by the name of Fethullah Gulen, to be removed. He lives in Pennsylvania. We said no. He arrested a U.S. citizen who resides in Turkey, and that's now the famous Pastor Bronson. Tragic that he is in prison. He's now under house arrest. And this dispute has really broiled over, and that is why the tariffs on aluminum steel are being issued by the Trump administration at a time when Turkey is in a financial crisis with the lira, their currency, being significantly devalued against the dollar, and inflation is spiraling up out of control.
So they could significantly diffuse this situation if they sent Pastor Brunson back?
Yeah.
Do you think they will?
The political dispute eases dramatically. I think this these sanctions that they're imposing on Turkey are going to hurt them at a time when they're in financial crisis. And they've got banks that are affected in Turkey because they've been loaning money to Turkey for years, and they're tied up in this. So it's going to impact in Europe as well. There'll be a little bit of a contagion here, not a massive one like what happened in Greece. So it's got implications. More pressure be on Erdogan. The most of the pressure, I think, is going to come from his people, to be frank about it, because they're every single day it's getting worse.
Absolutely, and Iran may be the same situation. And perhaps that's what we are not inciting, but sort of creating an environment that puts the pressure and the encouragement in some regard on the people of Turkey and the people of Iran. But what about the connection between Turkey and Russia? And, you know, do they see an alliance there that's could potentially be dangerous for us?
Yeah, we're frustrated with them this is over Syria. And the reality is that the Turks' argument with us is we're supporting the Syrian Kurds, who was the main ground force guided by Special Operations Force from the United States to defeat ISIS in their caliphate in eastern Turkey. They look at Syrian Kurds as terrorists in their mind. They're tied to they are connected to a terrorist organization that's trying to topple the regime and carve out Kurdistan inside of Turkey and Syria. But they're loosely tied to them. The reality is also we resent, as you just mentioned, the relationship that Turkey has with Russia and also with Iran that are actually operating against our interests in Syria. So that frustration is there. And it actually goes back to ISIS. ISIS would never have moved from 600 Iraqi fighters to 14,000 in 6 months and then in 18 months, 30,000 if Erdogan didn't have his border open. Even though we were saying shut it down, even though he said I've got it shut down, he let it happen because he strategically made a serious mistake. He thought that ISIS would go against the regime and take it down. He didn't understand. ISIS was interested in its own geography, which was east in Iraq and south in Saudi Arabia.
General Jack Keane, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good talking to you, Martha.